Welcome to another episode of Keeping It Real, the largest podcast made by real estate agents and for real estate agents. My name is DJ Paris. I am your guide and host through the show. And today is our monthly series called Closing Time with Chris Linsell of The Close. Now, this is a partnership with theclose.com. Let me tell you a little bit about The Close if you're not familiar. First, The Close is a new kind of real estate website designed to give agents, teams, and brokerages actionable strategic insight from industry professionals. They cover real estate marketing, lead gen, technology, and team building strategies from the perspective of working agents and brokers who want to take their business to the next level. Please visit theclose.com and subscribe to their newsletter so you can get notified each time they publish an article. Now, from The Close, we have Chris Linsell. Chris is The Close's resident expert on real estate topics ranging from marketing, lead generation, transactional best practices, and everything in between. He's a licensed agent in the state of Michigan. Chris has been part of hundreds of real estate transactions, from modest rural starter homes to massive waterside compounds. I would like to go to one of those massive waterside compounds, by the way. Now that it's the dog, we're getting into the hotter part of the year. But when Chris isn't writing, you'll find Chris fly fishing, which I would also like to do, in the trout streams of Michigan or on stage in his community theater's latest production. Chris, welcome once again to the show.
DJ, thanks for having me. And you've got a standing invitation to come on up.
You don't want to make that because I will actually show up. So
I've got an extra set of fly gear in the garage. We can be in a stream in 6 hours from now.
Yeah, I want the wading, the big wading trousers. So
I got them set.
Great. I've never done that. I would like to. Yeah. Well, thanks for once again being on the show. And we're huge fans of The Close. Every article you guys put out, and I say that without hyperbole, is an excellent article that I think would really benefit any agent looking to increase their business or just develop a different skill set to improve. So I'm such a huge fan of the site, and we're glad to have you.
Well, it's really a pleasure to be with you again, and definitely excited to continue to be a part of the cast of Keeping It Real, because we love what you guys are working on too. It's
thanks.
A lot of fun to be with you here.
So we're in very challenging or difficult times right now with. Obviously, the economy is still ebbing and flowing. We've got the pandemic. We've had the unfortunate incidences in Michigan. In Minnesota that have reverberated around the country. We're sort of right now, as we're recording this, still sort of in the middle of that. And of course, we're talking about real estate. So I would like to sort of get your thoughts on anything and everything related right now to real estate.
Sure. Well, so I think I want to cover a lot of different stuff in this conversation, but I want to first start off by pointing out, I don't know if you've been keeping an eye on this, and I know this is a little bit of a curveball. I know we didn't really talk about this, so
sure.
So be ready here. But I don't know if you've been paying attention, but the stock market recently does not seem to notice that there's like two national emergencies happening right now. Have you been following this at all?
The last 2 weeks, I've been if there is one thing that's been positive in my life, it has been, I look at my accounts every day and I go, oh, hey, look at that. How and why is the market up? But it is, or it has been.
Yeah. I've been having those same experiences, those same strange, oh, that's interesting over breakfast. And one thing I think I just wanted to mention in this context is that those markets and the behavior of those markets often are relatively independent to a lot of external factors that you think would affect that sort of thing. But housing doesn't normally flow that way. Housing is relatively affected by the things that are going on because housing is so affected by consumer confidence and sentiment, just kind of the basic attitudes and feelings of people that are living in our country right now. So, I have had some conversations over the last couple of days with people about how housing, if it just follows the stock market, we're in great shape. We dodged a bullet. And I'm not being a doomsday sayer. I don't think that that's necessarily impossible, but I think we should just, all keep calm and carry on here, because we don't have a reason to celebrate just yet.
Well, I think there's a lot of factors, sort of converging. I'm not sure how they're converging, but you have unemployment, which is, some say it could get up to as high as 20%, which has got to affect the housing market. I would assume it's some.
Absolutely.
And then you also have people who have been, all of us have been staying indoors, and a lot of us have been planning to make moves either prior to the pandemic or during the pandemic. We thought, okay, maybe it is time to move to a different area or a different type of property or a larger property. So there's just a lot of things hitting us at the same time. So I'm almost wondering, as restrictions have started easing, at least here in Illinois, Michigan has to have gotten a bit eased up. I'm wondering if there's just a lot of people that were ready to go and now they're ready to go, and if we won't see the actual impact of all of the unfortunate events that have happened, in the last several months. Maybe those won't hit us for a while. I really don't know. I'm curious to get your take.
Yeah, I think that you're probably right on that. And I think it's important to remember, for all of us to remember, that housing has a long tail, especially when it comes to the negative effects, the external effects of macro economies on housing. Because remember, if somebody, let's just think about, your average homeowner in the United States, if they miss a mortgage payment, the sheriff isn't knocking on their door the next day to kick them out onto the street. The typical foreclosure process is many months, and in some case years long, depending on the scenario. And when you add in a variable like the mortgage forbearances that have been a part of the economic relief that the U.S. government has been attempting to administer, it is really throwing wild cards into the timetable for this sort of event. So, I think you're 100% right that the understanding when and how we'll see effects of the last 3 to 4 months on the U.S. housing market, it's really impossible to say right now, but I think it's safe to say that there will be effects. We just have to be watching and waiting at this point.
Yeah, we have 700 realtors at our firm, and although a lot of them are part-time, sort of to be perfectly forthright. So our production throughout the pandemic in particular didn't really move that much, because we don't really have a lot of top producers who are doing 100+ deals a year, and those brokers were certainly, at least in our local area here, those brokers were affected quite a bit. The brokers who are part-time, who are doing a few transactions a year, seem to be able to still maintain that volume, because obviously it's much easier to maintain that volume. So we haven't, personally, in our company, we haven't seen much of a downturn. However, maybe we're not the best metric the way that our structure is set up, because we don't have a lot of those bigger hitters. So
well, I mean, I can tell you the latest data to come out of who was it? I think it's Black Knight, who is involved in the mortgage administration. I believe the latest figures come out of them was that 4.7 million mortgages in the United States were currently in forbearance. That's almost 9% of homeowners. So who knows exactly what's going to happen when we really are in uncharted territory. So we'll just have to wait and see. And speaking of uncharted territory, or maybe not so uncharted, I guess, depending on how you look at it, the events, the Black Lives Matter protests and the subsequent riots that have followed those protests, adding another layer to this, not so appetizing cake we've got sitting in front of us.
Right.
So it really is going to create some serious, like I said, mysteries as far as what the outcome is going to be. But the best we can do is watch and wait and continue to prepare.
Yeah, it seems to be that, yeah, nobody seems to really know what's going to happen. I will tell you, I've been speaking over the last few weeks to top producers, as we always
Hmm.
do on the show, and even the own top producers at our firms. They seem, and again, this is a hyper local Illinois,
Hmm.
Chicago thing, because
Hmm.
that's where I'm at. And they seem to be busier than ever. And I think that again is mostly people that were ready to make a move prior to the pandemic, and then now are maybe more able to go visit properties,
Hmm.
make offers. We're seeing lots of multiple offer opportunities these days. But again, I don't know how long that's going to last either. I
Yeah.
mean, rates are still really low too, so that's
Hmm.
another layer of complexity. Is you have these, seemingly positive signs and negative signs kind of merging,
Mm,
and I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens.
absolutely. Now, I think it's important to say too that I am not like I'm not in a negative mindset about real estate as a whole. In fact, I'm relatively bullish about
Oh,
the whole
great.
thing. I mean, truthfully, a lot of people, when a lot of people are back on their heels, I think this is the time to be on your toes as a real estate professional, and honestly, as a buyer or a seller as well, because um, when um, when a good chunk of a economic group, whether they're home buyers or sellers or real estate agents, when a good chunk of those people are back on their heels, the people who stay on their toes wind up advancing their progress a little faster than they would be otherwise. So, for any agents that are listening to this that are considering how they can speak to their clients right now, I always, I'm encouraging my clients right now to think about the opportunities if you're still in a position to buy or sell, the opportunities now that you have as a result of lower competition. If you are a seller, you have less properties to compete with on the market. And if you are a buyer, there's still a lot of buyers out there, but think about the fact that now money is cheaper to borrow.
Yeah.
You have less competition when it comes from the mortgage kind of angle of your transaction, and less pressure to try and squeeze the ideal home into a particular price point. So there are opportunities right now, and if you are still in a position to take advantage of those, now's a good time to do it.
Yeah, I think it's a great time to, and we've said this on previous episodes before, but it probably bears repeating. I've probably said it on about every episode I've done for the last few months. But
Mm,
now is the time to deepen connections with your sphere of
yeah.
influence, with your contact list. Even now, again, maybe not specifically this week or today, with a lot of the, um, you know, the racial issues that are happening, that are very important and needing to be addressed here as a country. But back to whenever you're able to focus and work on your business, this is such a great time to check in with the people that are in your contact database, and just see how they're doing, see how they're feeling. For example, we were talking about this before we went on the air. Chris was asking sort of how things were going here in Chicago was very badly hit and damaged by some of the rioting that's been happening. And I happen to live right near where that happened, and it's been a very scary time just for my own physical safety. And I'm not somebody that normally deals with a lot of physical. Thankfully, I'm not somebody that on a day-to-day basis deals with my own fear of being injured.
Mm,
But I had legitimate fear. I saw things that were very violent right in front of me, and so I've been dealing a lot with that. And I'm a good example of, I'm not a practicing realtor myself, but boy, it would have been nice. If I had a realtor, I would be my own realtor. But if I had one, it would have been nice for them to reach out and say, "Hey, I know you're right down there in the middle of it. How are you doing?"
yeah.
That would have meant a lot to me. And again, that's not the purpose of any of the protests, and it's not about me. But just as thinking about it from, how do I deepen my connections with my clients or my contacts? What a
Hmm.
great opportunity just to check in with people, and very delicately, but with empathy and compassion, and see how everyone's doing.
Yeah.
I didn't get a lot of, I didn't get, I mean, my friends and family asked, but that was it, and that was enough. But it would have been nice to have some of the other professionals
Mhm.
in my life reach out to see how I'm doing, and they didn't, and that's okay. But
Mhm.
what a great opportunity for someone just to feel a little less alone, to be able to vent some frustration, or talk about how they're feeling. And
Mhm.
so
Yeah. That's a really good point. And actually, I think I'm going to challenge you a little bit here, because you said just a second ago that this wasn't, this wasn't necessarily, I don't remember the exact phrase that you used, but you said something along the lines of, this wasn't exactly what these protests or riots were about, real
sure.
estate itself. But I'm gonna push back a little bit and say that there is a related element here that all real estate professionals need to think about, and it is just a further way and a further reason why we should be connecting with our clients right now. And
Yeah.
here's what I mean. There the racial injustice and police brutality and other, explicit issues that Black Lives Matter is confronting right now, these are very specific and in your face issues, but it's important to remember that these issues didn't emerge out of a vacuum. They came as they came to the maturity that they currently live in excuse me, as a result of a dozen or more contributing factors that have created this environment for them to fester and grow in. And one of those contributing factors, I'm ashamed to say, is housing discrimination.
Sure.
It is something that we don't like to think about as being a part of our industry. But according to the National Fair Housing Alliance, they did a report last year that in 2018 there were more fair housing complaints than there were since they started tracking this data.
Yeah.
We're going in the wrong direction on this, and more than 1 out of every 5 complaints comes from a person of color complaining that they are not being provided this equal opportunity to properties, services, or financing as a result of their race. And this is a time that we as real estate professionals can connect with our clients, regardless of who they are, especially our clients of color, and
Yeah.
say, listen, I am an advocate and an ally for you. Now is a time where we have an open dialogue right now amongst all people. And when I say open dialogue, I don't just mean everybody talks. I mean, some people are going to be listening as a part of this dialogue. We can be that person to reach out to our clients and say, listen, I'm an ally for you in this. I believe in your inalienable right to equal access to these things. How can I better serve you right now? And that can be a very powerful statement for real estate professionals right now.
I couldn't agree more. And this is a time where, unfortunately, these issues were largely, well, they've been ignored for hundreds, I mean, really hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And there's been systemic oppression, here in this country for people of color. And it's come to a head, like you said, a confluence of a lot of factors. And now, and also, I remember when I first started in real estate, I'm really in marketing here in real estate. And I remember one of our realtors came to us and said, this is 10 years ago, and said, I have a landlord who I represent. I do his or her, I think it was a him, a leasing for his units, and he will not rent to people of a certain ethnicity. I don't remember if it was black
Mm-hmm.
or I think it was, but whatever it was, he was discriminating based on race or some factor.
Mm-hmm.
And the agent said, I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, we had to educate the realtor on, you have to say goodbye to that client, which they already sort of knew, but they wanted to
Mm-hmm.
make sure they were protected
Sure.
in case, because, but it's absolutely a present thing.
Yeah.
And whether it's discussed much or not, I
Mm-hmm.
think real estate agents probably, once you've been in the business long enough, you'll come across a scenario where you
Yeah.
just won't believe it, and you'll go,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, this is a thing.
Yeah. Well, and I know this is going to sound kind of crazy to say, but I wish truthfully, I wish that every instance of housing discrimination was that overt, because it would be
Right.
so much easier. I don't know if you're I don't know if you're a dog person.
I have one underneath my desk right now.
Perfect.
Oh,
Okay, so
yeah, a little
I
6-pound Chihuahua who's 12 years old and getting old.
gotcha. Okay, so the living in Chicago, this might not apply necessarily to you, but 'cause I don't think you run across a lot of porcupines in Chicago.
Not many.
Okay, so it is a lot easier to identify the problem. If you've got a dog that gets stuck with the porcupine quills, you can see those quills and you can pluck those out.
Yeah.
If you've got a dog that gets sprayed by a skunk, you don't know where that smell is. You know that the dog stinks, but you don't know exactly where to wash this dog. And
Right.
that is honestly, maybe that's a silly way to draw this analogy, but when it comes to discrimination, housing discrimination, the overt housing discrimination, the porcupine quills that we can see and pluck out, those are upsetting and challenging, but they're things that we can cut out and move on from. It's the skunk smell that is the subtle sorts of neighborhood steering or
Yeah.
redlining or blockbusting that occurs on a relatively under the surface level that make this such a pernicious problem in our industry. And here's a good example of what I mean by this. Let's say you've got a bad actor in the real estate space who is steering people of color into a particular neighborhood. And though it is relatively subtle, this person will choose to show properties in in particular neighborhoods and not offer properties in other neighborhoods, which eventually starts to concentrate people of color into particular neighborhoods.
Sure.
And that alone is a problem right there. But if you then take that problem and you account for the fact that these people are also victims of systemic disadvantage, like
Yeah.
less access to education or pay inequity or less access to socioeconomic support.
Hmm.
All of a sudden you have a concentrated pocket of people who are dealing with really significant issues. And it is shown time and time again, when you have those concentrated pockets of challenge in people's life, it gives rise to poverty, to joblessness, to crime, to mental health issues, to a lack of social mobility. I mean, and all of that is contributed directly to a real estate agent who is saying, I don't want people who look like that living in this neighborhood. And that's something we have a direct impact on as professionals, and we need to be more active on combating.
Yeah, that's a really strong point. It's oftentimes, like you said, it's the skunk smell. It's an invisible thing. It's subtle. It's not as obvious to easily point out as you were saying. With the porcupine, when it's an obvious landlord saying, I won't rent to Black people. There's a pretty obvious thing to do there, and there's a way to spread the word, and there's a way to file complaints,
Yeah.
and we know what to, well, we might not necessarily know what to do, but we know how to get resources to find what to do.
Mm-hmm.
um, but the more subtle stuff that an agent may be doing, because they might think, well, my client is a certain type of person, they're going to want to live with other types of people just like
Mm-hmm.
them,
Yeah.
in wealth or in race or
Mm-hmm.
sexuality or whatever. It really does become a thing where in Chicago is certainly no exception, where we
Mm-hmm.
have pockets, where they are very homogenous.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever category you fit into, you
Mm-hmm.
can find a pocket of that here, and you can easily find a property there or find an agent that will put you into that area.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, it sort of just begets more and more homogeny, I guess, or
Yeah.
yeah.
So one thing that I always try to do on the close, and by the way, actually, I want to mention the close um, has made a commitment to not only to feature more agents of color in agent feature articles, as well as work to provide bylines to Black real estate agents and writers on our site. We've also committed to writing more content about housing discrimination in order to create a larger awareness around this particular issue and how it contributes to the issues at hand. And I think that is right there, that last point is something that I think all agents can do right now, is the first step in figuring out the solution to one problem. And I'm not saying the problem, I just mean little problems. The first step is educating yourself and talking about it, and more than talking about it, listening about it, listening to people who are experiencing it, listening to people who have experienced it in the past and understand what you as a professional can do. There is no way, this is, like I said, this is a multi-spoke problem, and there is no way that one agent or one website or one podcast or even an entire industry of agents is going to solve one problem on their own. It's going to require like a cacophony of voices that all are contributing towards a solution together, but we won't be contributing unless we're actually speaking up. So I'm really challenging listeners right now and my followers on social media and readers of the close. Do not be inactive right now. Activity can just mean listening. It can mean educating yourself. It can mean talking to your local MLS or your local professional organization and saying, tell me about how this happens in our communities and tell me what needs to change in order for it to be better. That is a good first step in understanding your role in helping this to be fixed, but we're not going to start moving in the other direction until we're all starting to think about it.
Yeah, I remember about 15 years ago, I was watching a 60 Minutes piece where I believe a Harvard researcher had developed a rapid fire test where, this is again 15 years ago or so, where you could, this algorithm, this computer program would ask you rapid fire questions about how you feel about various people. And it would identify, even if unconsciously, you didn't want to be seen as somebody that had bias, because of course, most of us don't want to think of ourselves as somebody that has any sort of bias.
Sure.
And this computer program has some statistical significance to be able to even discount your wanting to be seen as a good person to yourself. And so it was a test, and I said, oh, I got to take that because I do not have any biases. This is perfect. I am going to prove that this computer program does not work, or at least I'm going to prove that I am a perfect human without any unfair prejudices or thoughts about any type of quality of anybody. And so I took this test and I thought, well, I clearly aced that one because I remember my answers to the questions, and it came back and it said, actually, you tend to think a little less of women and their abilities than you do of men. And I went, well, wait a minute. And I thought, and I went, oh, maybe that's true. And this is 15 years ago. And I truthfully didn't know that about myself. I wasn't that aware. And so, and I'm not saying, look, all of us are horrible people, because, I do believe that I've not treated women differently than I would treat men, but even identifying your own unconscious biases are really, really important. I think now, especially what's happening right now, it's a good time to examine, hey, where do I maybe not show up in a completely fair and equitable way? Where do I have these little nudges that have me treating people maybe slightly differently, or maybe my clients, I think of them as different based on certain factors. This is a great opportunity for us to identify our own issues.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's you'll have to forgive me because I don't remember the exact university that coined this phrase, but there is, just like you're saying here, there's a term for this overt discrimination that people call door slamming discrimination. It's like somebody walks up to your door, who's somebody who you don't like, you slam the door in their face. That's easy to identify. It's a porcupine quill.
Right.
It is those more subtle unconscious biases that create this culture and this climate where we can be contributors without really understanding that we're contributing. And I think that sort of self-awareness is really important. So was there anything that you did, if you don't mind me asking, is there anything that you feel like you did to help correct that?
Well, what I wanted, I first had to wrestle with this. Is this true? And look, the data was pretty clear that it seems to be true, and it was subtle, but it was still there. And I said, okay, so let's just assume that I'm wrong in my conscious mind, who doesn't want me to be seen as imperfect. Maybe there's a chink in the armor here. Maybe there's, I'm not, I do have some unconscious biases. And so as I started to reflect, the awareness alone was enough to get me to have sort of just think through my decisions and my behavior towards other people in particular, because my biases were around other people. And I started thinking, okay, I started just reflecting in my interactions with people, and I started just being aware that, okay, I have an unconscious bias to want to do this. I'm not even aware of it. So I'm going to try to bring it to the surface so that if it's unconscious, there's not a whole lot I can do about that. If it's conscious, I can at least, I have a shot of doing the right thing. And so I believe that helped me. I haven't taken the test. And maybe those biases necessarily don't always go away, but just being aware enough about them might get you to be able to make a different decision when confronted with where that unconscious bias might show up. Now it becomes conscious, and you might have the ability to just choose differently. And so as far as for me personally, I'd like to think I have made progress, but it's so subtle, and I don't have any overt examples of, well, I used to be a real, not nice person, and I would do not nice things, and now I'm nice. It's not that way for me. So it's more like, every interaction I have, I just think if the person's slightly different from me, okay, am I showing up in a way that is authentic? Am I acknowledging their wholeness as a human? And what's the right way to proceed here? And so, yeah. That's my answer. I don't know.
Well, that's very thoughtful, and honestly, I think that is the case for most people. And I'm gonna, I can't speak for everybody. I certainly wouldn't speak for every real estate professional, but for anyone who's listening to this, I think we can all identify at least with the feeling of, boy, what's the best way to say this? I apologize if I'm going to cross a political correctness line here, but please understand that this is, I'm just trying to communicate an idea here. We all have a certain, there's a particular client. If we all close our eyes and picture the perfect client archetype, whether it is somebody who is financially secure, whether it is somebody who has a timeline that lines up with our lead generation plan of attack, we all have the perfect client in mind. And I think it is natural, based on our own experiences, to assign other characteristics to that person as a part of that process. And that in itself can create some unconscious and unintentional bias. I know it has done that way for me in the past. I'll give you an example. I'll just I'm going to hold myself accountable here. For me, in my local market, we are a very racially undiverse area, overwhelmingly Caucasian in my area of Michigan. And so it's not really a matter of discrimination or non-discrimination based on color, because we really don't have much of that opportunity here to do that, even if we wanted to, or if that was a part of our interaction. But here, there's a lot of age discrimination that happens, because there's a certain that client archetype that I'm talking about. Those people who are the most financially secure, who are on my timeline, who are cash buyers, these are typically older people in their, like, maybe in their 50s, in their 60s, maybe buying their retirement home. I'll be honest, they're, in my head, they're a successful, at least back in the day, they were a successful businessman, and with those terms specifically.
Sure.
And I didn't realize that I was building this archetype until I started thinking about it, and I realized, like, if this is who I'm picturing, how could I not be leaning towards favoring these clients over other clients? And that was a moment of self-discovery for me, that I said to myself, you know what, this is not the way that we offer a fair and balanced market to anybody who wants a place to live. And it was a moment that I know I had to kind of come to the carpet internally and think about. And this is just another opportunity for us as professionals to think about whether or not we are fulfilling our fiduciary responsibility, not just to our clients, but if you look in the Code of Ethics of the National Association of Realtors, it states in plain English, black and white, that we have a fiduciary responsibility to our communities to be arbiters of truth and the gatekeepers, really, for information about the housing market, and that we have to present that in a truthful, fair, and non-biased way. And if now is a time that you need to reevaluate whether or not that's happening, this is a great time to do a little soul searching and figure out if you need to make some course adjustments. Now's the time to do it, because we've got an opportunity here to create positive change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the most effective ways, at least for me personally, so for many, many years ago, this is a different type of issue that I was having personally, where I realized in my life, I didn't have a tremendous amount of empathy. This goes back many, many, many years. And I realized for people that were suffering in any capacity, whether they were a homeless person I passed on the street, to any type of person undergoing some sort of terrible, societal issue or economic issue or racial issue, whatever. I didn't feel a lot for those people. I didn't think negatively of them. I just didn't feel for them as much as I wanted to. And I realized I would walk by here in Chicago. We have, a large homeless population. I would walk by homeless people, and I wasn't the kind of person that would say, well, they should get a job, because I knew that's not something someone chooses to be. There's a lot of mental health issues, but even if they do choose to be that doesn't mean I should have any sort of negative opinion of somebody who is down on their luck and struggling. And in fact, the right response for me was to, I wish I was somebody that could garner more empathy and compassion. And so what I did, because I truthfully had to confront an unflattering truth about myself, which was I really didn't feel much for those people. And I felt embarrassed about that. I was ashamed of that. And so I started to do some volunteer work, because I thought, well, maybe if I spent time understanding how tough it is to be homeless, then that would just at least give me more understanding and probably more empathy. And I that is exactly why I did it. And also I felt it was just a nice thing to do, was to give back and volunteer. But I thought, boy, this will at least get me to not ignore this issue anymore. And I did that for some time. And I've moved on to be participants in other types of organizations that I support. But it was really helpful for me. So I think for everyone listening, if you are someone who feels like you've identified a challenge in yourself that you'd like to improve around, discrimination, bias, prejudice, whether it's in your business or personal life, getting involved and getting more intimate with those people who are suffering it will almost certainly make you feel more empathy, and you will probably take further action to assist them. So I think, if nothing else, what this has done to all of us, or at least for me personally, who doesn't have to deal with a lot of these issues. I am a white male. I have a lot of privilege just assigned to me at birth, and I am, beyond grateful to have that. But is it fair? It is not. And so, I now have this opportunity to really continue to evaluate myself and say, okay, well, where can I provide more value? Where can I give back? How can I help? And what can I go out and do? And where can I devote time and energy and maybe even money to helping those people? So it's a really great opportunity just to get involved. And I don't want to say great opportunity because it's a very unfortunate opportunity, but it is something that we can, think about ourselves and go, what am I doing enough? Am I actually doing something to help these issues in my professional life as a realtor, in my personal life as a just a human being, as a citizen? What am I doing to make things better? And now is, boy, there, all you have to do is look on social media and you will see a tremendous amount of resources posted to how to address some of these, at least on the racial issue side, some of those issues and ways you can get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would really encourage real estate agents, in addition to the sorts of resources that DJ just mentioned, if you are thinking about how you can play a successful, positive role in advancing issues like housing discrimination, which is a direct contributor towards the sorts of racial injustice that Black Lives Matter is dealing with now front and center, one of the first things that you can do to have an immediate positive impact is to start talking to the people on your street, in your neighborhood, in your professional association. We all know real estate is a hyper local business. I mean, it's fun to look at the big statistics for the country or for the state or even for the city at large, but we all know that the most important statistics in real estate are the ones that matter to an individual block or to a neighborhood, because ultimately, if you're putting together a CMA for a house, even though it's nice to know what a house of similar square footage sold for in the next county over, that doesn't matter nearly as much as what a house of the similar square footage sold for next door. And it's the same thing with these sorts of issues. The solutions start on a micro level, and they start with individuals in their own local markets. So go talk to other realtors in your office, talk to them in your professional association, talk to your clients, and start these conversations. Because if everybody started these conversations in their micro markets, that sort of momentum would build to a macro effect that would be pretty positive.
Yeah, I think if we all just focus on one thing we can do, like Chris was saying, a micro change, or ultimately collectively, if we can, I was seeing all of the black boxes that were posted on Instagram by mostly non people not of color. I'm sure there were lots of people of color posting, but I was noticing in particular all of the people who were white posting these black box images, and I just hoped. I said, I really hope that when we move on as a country to our next, big news issue, which sadly, if we don't continually talk about this will, get pushed under the rug like it has for so many years. But if we were to, to take action, if, and go out and do something in some capacity that was, helping to make things better. I say, I really hope everyone who posted those doesn't forget about it in 2 weeks and continues to, progress that movement. And whether it's just in yourself and to be a better citizen, or more about your local community, or the national community or the global community, how can we make things better? I just hope everyone who's posting right now so feverishly on social media also is out there, thinking about other ways to get involved, because every one of those organizations needs people. They need workers. And so get involved, and whether it's just your local community or your chamber of commerce, or go around talking to business owners about, how you can support them from a real estate perspective, or your clients. This is all just huge things. They seem small, but they're actually quite big.
Yeah, totally agree. And I'm hoping that the next time we talk, we can talk about the positive effects of those sorts of efforts.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm hopeful for that as well. And we now are at a crossroads as a country where hopefully there's going to be a lot of people who will no longer stand for the unfortunate injustice that has been. So yeah, and I applaud you and the close for thinking about how having more black voices to be heard or read or seen. And I it's funny, I had never thought about that either for my show is was you were talking about that. I go, I wonder how many people of color I've actually interviewed for the show, because I never think about it. I just look at whoever's the top producer and then we ask them, or they ask us, and it's really just that simple. I've never thought about whether somebody's a man or a woman, or what their any other qualities are. And it's like, do I have enough Black voices speaking out on my show? And the answer is no, I don't. So it's a challenge for me to find those top producers who have, maybe not had as an equal opportunity to have a voice. And you guys are doing the same thing. I think that's amazing.
Well, that's ultimately what we're shooting for. And a good example of this, and this is one that, again, I'm holding myself accountable to. More than 60% of the real estate sales agent population in the United States are female, and an overwhelming number of thought leaders and pundits and people like me who talk about this stuff all the time are white dudes. I mean, it is the reality of things. And I'm not suggesting that myself or other white men in these positions aren't qualified to talk about it, but it does lead us to a question of, if we are not representing the population of professionals here, whose voices and whose perspectives could we be reaching out for in order to get a clearer picture of the sorts of things that matter to real estate professionals?
Wow. Well, I think that is a perfect final sort of for statement or challenge to our audience. And in some ways, this might be my, certainly an unfortunate type of conversation to have, but maybe the most important conversation I've ever had on this show. So I appreciate, Chris, and I mean, we focus on helping people build their business, and you and I mostly talk about that, and we know how to do that. And I think we're effective there. But we stretched ourselves today to talk about some uncomfortable truths. And I hope our listeners appreciate it. I'm sure they will, or have. But I want to remind everyone out there to please, if you're interested in what Chris had to say, and you should be, because he's got a lot of, I think, amazing thoughts around all sorts of ideas and topics around real estate, please visit theclose.com and read from their wonderful editors who write. They publish just a handful of articles a week, and they're always really long form articles. They're good articles. It's the best website I've seen for real estate agents really looking to improve. So I couldn't be a bigger fan. So if everyone, goes to theclose.com and checks out, their most recent articles, subscribe to their newsletter, your business is going to improve, because they are thought leaders, but they're also thought provocateurs, and they're able to bring you, different ideas and strategies that maybe you hadn't thought of before, that you needed reminding of and you already knew. So go to theclose.com. Chris, it was a pleasure on behalf of the audience for having you on. As per usual, you're a fantastic guest. We're thrilled to have you. And on behalf of Chris and myself to the audience, we say thank you. We hope everyone is safe and healthy, and also social distancing still. Nobody in Chicago is wearing a mask anymore, so I'm a little worried about that, but hope everyone's safe and healthy, and doing their best to make this their little corner of the world a little better. So Chris, thanks again, and we'll see you next month.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, DJ.